All right, welcome back to the channel, guys. My name is Eric Johnson Jr. And for those who haven't seen my profile before, I try to do all things racing. So if you like that kind of content, make sure to hit the follow button, subscribe, whatever you can on this platform. To be honest with you, I try to do everything in motorsports that I can. I take every opportunity that I can to see it from any perspective that I can. So if you want to join, follow the journey, feel free. You most definitely don't have to. But if you're here, that probably means that you want to see our content. So I appreciate you taking the time to listen. If you haven't already, go back to listen to the first two episodes if you want to hear maybe what this podcast is, what we're doing with it. And also, most importantly, our last episode just covered starting from ground zero, where we started with nothing, to where partway through where we were when we were talking about how we got to the end of our baby grand experience. And personally, that was where we started, and I kind of want to pick up from there, kind of where we left off for this YouTube, or for this portion, kind of covering from there to where we are now. So we ended that episode talking about the end of our third baby grand season, and now it's kind of important to go back a little bit and backtrack before we go too far forward. So I'll do my best to keep you guys along, and I'm sure I'm missing things, of course. We're talking about years and years of stories and experiences, right? But for the most part, I'm doing my best to cover this for you guys with the highlights I see that fit, and you'll see me looking over for anyone watching on the video form, glancing at my notes more often than not, probably. But yeah, still getting used to this. I'm going to sit down, and I recorded these first three episodes in one go, so you're probably wondering, why is he wearing the same thing? Well, newsflash, I did this in about 3 hours, sitting in my spare bedroom. So, yeah, no, I'm super excited to get into this and continue this new opportunity, which is this podcast. So, welcome to In the Driver's Lounge with Eric Johnson Jr. I myself am Eric Johnson, for anyone that doesn't follow along, and to some, I'm probably a nobody, the most. To others, you might know me because I'm the driver of the number 19 Chevrolet for Bill McAnally Racing in the ARCA West Series. And for some, you might just know me as Eric Johnson, the kid that you grew up with or were around as I was growing up. But whoever it may be, I appreciate you tuning in and supporting us, because if I didn't make it clear in the first episode, I am blessed to have the support that we have. And I can just, people will tell me maybe I say it too much. Some people say I don't say it enough. And when it really comes down to it, I feel the need to pause and make it brutally clear that, like, I try not to use filler words too often. Another part of the podcast thing I'm getting used to. But I can't make it clear enough how lucky I feel to be where I'm at. And while day to day, it feels like it's my regular day job, right? And I have that time, or I have that situation come up all the time where people ask what I do. And I don't know if I should answer. I am a full-time, unpaid race car driver that's considered a professional, but does a majority of it, sitting by himself, talking to a camera or in a shop, and doesn't make money doing it, but enjoys the hell out of what he does and hopes to do this for a career someday? Or do I say, oh, I sit at a desk all day and work in HR in my folks' property management company, because that's the other job. I do a few other things, for anyone curious before I get too into this. I do work on some other people's cars in our shop. I thought this was probably important to cover just because people want to get to know me, right? Or at least I would think that if you were, this is something you'd want to know. But while I do race cars, unfortunately, it's not what I do for a living. I mentioned I work a few days a week for my folks in their property management company, not only doing HR, but after hours. And I'm sure my girlfriend loves this. No, she doesn't. Newsflash. But from 5 p.m. to 8 a.m., I answer all emergency calls from each of our residents. And I think we're up to like 3,500 units now across Southwest Washington and Northwest Oregon. But yeah, that's a lot of calls to take sometimes. Sometimes it's not bad at all, but you can imagine it it gets busy now and then. So I do those two things, and on the side, as a side gig, work on some people's race cars in our shop, and here and there work as a driver's instructor down at Portland International Raceway. So a few ways I make money in the side to help support what we do financially. And the only reason I bring that up now is up to now, or I guess, yeah, up to here, the first episode talked a lot about when I was younger, and at the time wasn't old enough, or I guess you're always old enough to work, right? But just wasn't working at the time, didn't have necessarily the need or expectation. But as time went on, it became more apparent that obviously I needed to start making money, and not only making money, but supporting my hobby, because it was going to take everything I could gather to do what we do now. And we'll get to that. But, you know, being 5 minutes into this episode or whatever it is already, I want to go back. So 2021, where we left off. I was talking about our year in baby grands and everything that happened in that, the loss of my grandmother, bless her soul, and the, just the things we went through that year, the highs and lows and everything before it. But one thing that was notable to happen in that season, before it ended, after my grandma passed, we were talking about NASCAR, which was a love that my dad and her and I shared, and with many other people, of course. But for me personally, it was important to try to find a way into that. And up to this point, we had no connections. The only thing I did have, which I didn't mention in the first episode, was we went to Sonoma one year, which I did mention that. But one of those times we went, as I was snooping around in the garage area, as I tried to do growing up as much as I could, I came across the Goodyear trailer. And I don't know how often this happens, but they were giving tires out for free for whatever reason. And they had drivers sign the tires too, which was cool. So the tire I got, I begged them to throw me one over the fence, and he did. Bless his soul. Whoever you are out there, thank you for the tire that I now have that stinks up our basement, because I tried to have it in my room and my mom said it stunk, but whatever. So anyways, whoever you were, thanks for throwing me that tire, because that honestly led to everything that happened now in a way. So I got this tire. I looked down and had no clue whose name was on it. Jesse Iwuji, which was written in cursive, which at the time, fun fact, I couldn't read, because I could read normal English, but they didn't teach me cursive growing up. And so that was a fun learning curve, you could say. But anyways, making fun of myself here sitting in this room. But yeah, I got the tire. It was from a guy named Jesse Iwuji, who at the time was racing in the ARCA West series, and or I should call it the K&N West series. I think he was in the number 36 Chevrolet. Came off his yellow car that he ran at Sonoma. And not necessarily important, other than the fact I forced my folks to let me drive 10 hours back with them with a Goodyear slick in my lap. But got the thing home, and my dad and I were talking, like, after my grandma was gone and we didn't know if we were going to be doing those trips or not. We were racing, and we were just really looking for, like, the next step. The baby grand stuff was great, but how do I get it to go from, our weekend hobby in our own car to getting around the people I needed to take the next step? So the only thing I knew how to do at the time was use social media to my advantage. So I went on Instagram, Facebook, you name it, and I sent every driver I could possibly think of a copy and paste message, practically in summary, saying, hey, I'm a no one. You don't know who I am because I'm a no one, but I drive race cars. I love doing it, and I really, really want to get around a professional team to just see what it's like. For me personally, I didn't know what it would lead to what it led to now. But for me, I was just like, I just want to see what they do. So when I go to the track, I can kind of try to, make sure I'm doing things right. And in a way, because obviously the two worlds are very different, but still. And not a single person answered that DM respectively, because I probably looked like an idiot trying to say, hey, I know you've worked hard to get to where you are, but make it easy for me and give me a name, you know? And kind soul that he is, Jesse Awuji, again, full circle, the one that I had the tire of, replied, and he said, hey, kid, you might know this name. Go ahead and give him a call. He's probably your best chance. And he gave me Bill McAnally's cell phone number. You know, for anyone who doesn't know who Bill McAnally is a team owner from the most successful team owner out here on the West Coast series for NASCAR. They're currently the ARCA West series, but at the time, K&N West or whatever it was in the past, the West series, Bill's team was the most successful team in that series' history, winning, I think, up to 11 championships now, if not 10. And had been the development out here for some of the most successful drivers to ever come through the West Coast. And so a lot of people are driven for him. Some may know Derek Kraus, Jesse Love, most notably right now, is having success in the Xfinity Series. He drove Bill's famous 16 car. Todd Gilliland, Eric Holmes, the list goes on and on. But yeah, Bill himself was a driver, but one time it pretty much came to the point where he decided a team owner was where he should be. And him and his number 16 famous Napa car have been dominating the series for the longest time. And I just knew them as the Napa car. I didn't really know much about them other than at the time, Haley Deegan was driving for them, which was notable. And so, of course, I knew who they were because of that, I guess. And she was in the number 19, you know, now that we're in driving. But anyways, at the time, you know, I was like, damn, you know, this is a real NASCAR team owner, and I got a cell phone number. So you're going to learn I'm pretty impulsive and probably don't sit down and think things through as much as I should. So whatever you want to call it, spontaneous, I guess, or impulsive, but I'm going to call it impulsive. Anyways, I remember getting this phone number, and I walk upstairs. The only person home at the time was my mom, and I said, hey, Mom, I'm going to go downstairs, and when I come back up, my life's either going to be changed forever or I'm going to be sad. I don't know what's going to happen. So I went downstairs, and I just called the number, and to my luck, now knowing how busy of a man Bill is, Bill answered, and on the other line of the phone, I just hear Bill McAnally, and I thought it was like his office or something. No, this was his cell phone number. Okay, so Bill answers. Being the great guy he is, he heard me out instead of hanging up. Thanks, Bill, if you're listening to this. But I don't even know if he remembers this, honestly. I mean, I think he does, but oh well. Bill answers and says the typical thing. Hello, who's this? Why are you bugging me? And I told him, I said, to put it, briefly, I just, hey, I'm a 16, 17-year-old kid from Southwest Washington, and you don't know me because I haven't done anything, but I drive race cars, and I'm really, really just want to be around a team to see what it's like and apply it to my racing. And so, is there any way that I could possibly just come out to a race or help or, maybe just, come check out the team up close just to see what it was like. And to my surprise, he was like, hey, you want to come out to a race? And that's my Bill McAnally impression. Yeah. I'm terrible at impressions. Anyways, so Bill said, yeah, we got a race coming up in a couple of weeks. You get yourself out there. I don't care. I'm not paying your way, but I'll sure as hell let you come up to the cars and check things out. So, one thing led to the next, and my dad and I, so grateful that they would obviously, my parents, be in the position to help me out with this, but he, as our yearly kind of thing goes, helped me get down to Sonoma, and we went down in 2021, June of 2021 to Sonoma Raceway, and I had no clue what I was getting into. Had no clue what to wear, no clue on how to act, no clue on where I was allowed to go or what I was supposed to be doing that day. And I probably bugged their Kim, who was their, I guess, I don't know the best way. I'm going to say coordinator at the time. She worked in the paperwork side, basically, of the race team, making sure everyone was scheduled where they needed to be and helping with itineraries and flights and booking and all that. And I bugged her way too much leading up to this, but they got me licensed and got me in, thankfully. And I showed up and just kind of walked in, and my dad went up to the stands, and that's always how my dad's been since I started. If you didn't get that kind of vibe from the first episode, my dad's always kind of let me take the reins on things. And at the time it was scary, but like, I appreciate it now looking back, just because of the experience it led to. So yeah, no, I was grateful for it. But we went in, and I kind of walked up to some of the cars and had no clue who really the drivers were at the time. At the time, it was Cole Moore and Jesse Love. Like I said, Deegan just finished driving for them, so I guess it was the year before where she was driving. And yeah, kind of introduced myself. I didn't even realize I introduced myself to Cole. I just said hello to everyone I could, and went up to some crew guy that I could find, which Scott was their tire guy on the 16. Went up to Scott, tapped him on the shoulder. I said, "Hey, I'm just here helping out, and Bill said I could come ask you guys, where you need help." And he said I can come ask. And Scott said, I'm not your guy. Go ask him. And he points over, I think, to Travis Sharp at the time, who was crew chiefing the 16 car. And so, needless to say, I went over and tried to figure out what I can do, but realistically, there just wasn't nothing. I wasn't a registered crew member, and I didn't understand how the system worked, but you can't touch the cars at that point if you're not a registered crew member. So keep a note, I wasn't supposed to touch the cars. And Arca, I hope you're not listening. Anyways, so the practice goes green. I'm watching from behind the pit road wall, and the 16 car with Jesse's had a great career, so I'm not dogging on him, but bro backed it into the fence, and wheel hopped it coming down into 11 under a downshift, and backed the car into the fence, into the tires in turn 11. For anyone that's familiar with Sonoma, if not, it's pretty much a U-turn where you got to go from about, I'd say, 120 to 30 miles an hour, roughly, give or take, a whole bunch. But anyways, it's a U-turn to the right, and it's a good spot for guys to lose the cars if they're not handling correctly, or, if they're inexperienced or whatever. Jesse ends up wrecking. Car comes in, and the guys are scrambling, and I got to figure out what I need to do because my camera just died. Do I just let it charge and then keep recording, or do I end this and come back? I'm going to stop this recording in hopes that I can continue it. And if not, I'm talking to myself right now. If I do continue, you will see me back in just a second. So thank you for watching, and on to the next. Well, we're back. Okay, so got that sorted. Sorry, I had to let the camera charge for a bit. So in the meantime, worked on uploading our first couple episodes. So in the meantime, yeah, that was fun. It looks like this is going to work out kind of how I hoped. So excited about that. And for anyone watching the video, sorry if you see me moving my arm down here. I got my dogs here hanging out. Got Winston, the golden doodle, and Rocky, the blue heeler, hanging out. But anyways, yeah, so jump back in. Apologies, the camera died. So going to try to continue where I left off. We were talking about my experience down at Sonoma for the first time with BMR, which was incredible, but kind of continuing where we were. I believe I mentioned last that Jesse Love had crashed the car in practice. And yeah, so he went down into 11 and unfortunately backed the thing into the fence. And the team was like thrashing on his car, right? So I come over and I see that stuff's just flying everywhere. And guys are running all over the place trying to figure out what to do because I think it was the right rear of the car was just mangled. And yeah, so they're trying to piece something back together. And at some point, somebody jumped over the wall and handed me the quarter panel. I think it was one of the safety officials actually showed up with the quarter panel and gave it to me. And at the time, I was thinking to myself, oh, they gave this to the wrong guy, right? And so, of course, I went up to the first person I could find, who I can't even remember, honestly, who it was. Somebody at the team, though, maybe one of them can point out and remind me, but um, I, I went up to him and said, hey, somebody just gave me this quarter panel. I don't really know what to do with it. And they saw it was all tore up, right? So, dude, I don't know, throw it away. Like, thing's junk. So I called my dad, and I was like, Dad, I'm over here. They just crashed the car. And he's like, I know, I'm watching. Okay. Hey, anyways, they crashed the car. They gave me a quarter panel, and they told me to throw it away. There's no way I can throw this thing away, dude. So I was like, you got to meet me on the tunnel. And he's like, what? You got to walk down to the tunnel and meet me there, man. So anyone that's not familiar with Sonoma's layout, they got tunnels that cross from about like the turn 10 corner underneath turn 11 and come out on the back side of the grandstands. And so I ran out as quick as I could with this thing because I didn't want people to think I was gone for too long. I wanted to get back and see what was going on. And ran down and had my dad meet me. And as we're in the fan zone, I vividly remember somebody being like, is that off Jesse's car? And I was like, yeah. And I was like, I'm here helping him. And they're like, oh, man, he's our neighbor. And I'm like, huh? Like, I was like, oh, man, jig's up. I'm gonna be caught. But anyways, I didn't think I was coming back to work for these guys. And of course, I always wanted something. I mean, god dang, I brought a tire home. So, I mean, I was going to take whatever I can get. And anyways, my dad took it. He went back up the stands. And I went down, and I was actually, it's important to know, I was supposed to be working on the 99 car, okay? So, spectating the 99 car, okay? And I go down there, and I see these guys still thrashing on it, but the way the car was positioned, I didn't see them working on the right rear anymore. I was like on the left side of the car. They had the cars angled to where when you're on pit road, you could see the driver's side of the car. And so guys were underneath, and one guy was like, hey, kid, give me a wrench. I need whatever, 3/4 or whatever, 15/16. And so I was like, me? And he's like, yeah, and I jumped over, not knowing at the point, again, hope Arca's not listening. Anyways. Already happened. What are you going to do? So I swear I'm licensed now. But anyways, I jumped over the wall and in practice started helping these guys on this thing. Just wrenching on it, trying to get it ready to go. And yeah, so they get the car back on track. And I guess looking back on the story from what I've heard now, they took their pit sign and cut this thing up and made a quarter panel out of their pit sign, their tin pit sign that they had out of aluminum. Anyways, they cut this thing up, sheared it, and bent it, made it look into whatever shape of a quarter panel they could, because keep in mind, they couldn't figure out where the quarter panel went. And I never heard this until I left the track, and that secret lived with me until very recently when I started telling these guys, because they started seeing photos of my shop, and one of the proud things I have hanging in my shop is this quarter panel, okay? And anyways, Jesse, it didn't affect him in the race. I think he ended up crashing again anyways. No, again, not dissing Jesse, but wasn't his day. And yeah, funny thing, but I always love that story. So I started working with them that day in a way I shouldn't probably have, but it was fun. I finished up, said my goodbyes, thanked everyone for the opportunity, and went and hung out with my dad. And next day was the Cup race. Watched the Cup race, went on our way, and like Monday we're gonna drive home. Keep in mind it's a 10-hour drive. So at this point, the teams had already gone back to their shops, and Bill's team every Monday has what they called like Monday team meeting where they kind of covered everything. And you would think it would be kind of like sitting around in an office somewhere, and that's always what I imagine when the crew guys were talking about it. But I come to find out it's a group circle out in the shop in front of the cars, and they all sit there and chat for 10 minutes. Anyways, the reason that's important, I'm on my way home. And out of nowhere, I'm just in the back seat. It's probably like sometime early afternoon, and my phone goes off in the mountains of like going over the passes on our way back home from California up to Washington. And I'm like, Dad, you gotta pull over. And he's like, what's on? What's wrong? I'm like, Bill's calling. And he's like, who? I'm like, Bill McNally. He's calling me right now. Pull over. I thought I was in trouble. Like, I was like, okay, this is it. Bill's coming for the quarter panel. I just lost all my shots of ever getting in the garage. Like, I'm screwed. And I pick up, and I'm, hello? He's like, hello, is this Eric? Yeah, this is Eric. He's like, Eric, Real quick, I don't got much time to talk, but and I'm like, oh, here we go, this is it, right? And he's like, we just got out of our Monday meeting, and I don't know what you did exactly, and hold my breath, and I don't know what you did exactly, but all the guys are talking about this kid that was down there at Sonoma and jumped over the wall and helped them, and I'm like getting my apology ready at this point. He's like, yeah, and I don't know, it sounded like you were pretty helpful, so if you'd like for the rest of the season, I'd really like to pay your way to come out and help us and work as a crew member. And my dad heard this on speakerphone, and our hearts stopped. I swear to God, like it was not what I expected at all. Of course, yeah. No, we'll figure this out. And he's like, yeah, I'll get you in contact with Kim. She'll get you out there, and I look forward to working with you kids. So, from that day on, accidentally stealing a quarter panel and working on a car was my opening door to working for Bill McAnally Racing as a crew member. And for the rest of 2021, my first race was going out to Colorado. They had me working on JoJo Wilkinson's car, who was the 1 and the 19, kind of went back and forth. Anyways, yeah, they had me working on JoJo's crew. Met a lot of the guys that way, and just kind of kept my head down. I was a little worried I was going to get jumped for this quarter panel that I guess they clearly didn't care about, as I come to learn. But, looking back, whenever I asked those guys about that, they're like, that's where that damn thing went. We had to destroy our pit sign, blah, 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 and I'm just like dying. Like, look, I didn't think I was going to work with you guys again. Like, you got to understand it from my perspective. People pay for this kind of thing, and you just gave it to me, man. Okay? So, sorry, I'm distracted by my dogs. Anyways, so I take the corner bell, get out of there. Somehow I'm a hired pit crew member. Okay, so fast forward, let's see. Just started going to races with them, and at the end of 2021, they were going to Portland, which, for anyone that doesn't know, is a road course. And for them to go to Portland was a big deal for me because, come to find out later on in these stories, you guys will learn that I got really big into road course racing throughout 2021. And it was an opportunity of mine to really show them that maybe I kind of knew what I was talking about, and I kind of nonchalantly tried to maybe mention that I've been around race cars, but not like that I drive them, And I think Bill at this point kind of forgot that I even said that, if he heard it on the phone originally. He's so busy, it's, I can't imagine that's a detail he really remembered. And so excited for them coming to Portland. That was a big deal for me. So at the time, I think they had me on Cole Moore's car, and I got put up into the chicane as a spotter. And I remember, oh, camera's moving, dog. Hey, come on, bye, there, move. There you go. Trying to get him down off my mic stand. He was wanting to lay on it. Anyways, Portland. They threw me in the spotter stand, and that whole situation was a funny ordeal in itself because I was at Portland and they were like looking for an extra spotter. Somebody couldn't, I think like one of them missed their flights or something coming in, and all of a sudden they're like, "Hey, kid, you ever spot before?" I'm like, "Yeah, sure, yeah, kind of. I know what I'm doing." Little did they know, I'm like, I spotted on iRacing one time, and they're like, "You know this track though? Like you're from here, right?" I'm like, "Yeah, no, I love this place." So they sent me down to the chicane, and one thing led to the next, and I was spotting for Cole Moore. So that's where I started my spotting resume, which eventually went on to grow, and now I can proudly say I've spotted both Arca and Xfinity, but, take that with a grain of salt because I'm just a road course spotter. Anyways, so that was the start with Bill McAnally, and I think a lot of people find that kind of silly just because none of it should have happened the way it did, and it was all kind of like just one thing after another that was just a miracle and chance and blah, blah, blah happened perfectly for that to work out. And so I was blessed to keep working with them for the rest of the season. Just as you can imagine, between the stuff with my grandma that I talked about in our last episode, and me just being who I was, being so caught up in the world of NASCAR as a potential dream, I was just on cloud nine. I loved it. But yeah, I got to be there for Jesse's Irwindale win, which was super cool. And throughout the season, which this kind of leads us into our next category, throughout the season, the crew chief that I mentioned earlier that was working on Jesse's car, Travis Sharp, I came across him, and I think we had the conversation, honestly, in a Starbucks at, was it Irwindale? I feel like it was Irwindale. The morning before that race, all the crew guys get breakfast next to the hotel, and we're all sitting there waiting. And something you're going to come to learn about me is I tried to make small talk with every person that I could, because you never know like what the opportunity could lead to. And that's one thing I've really learned is you have to network. You have to talk to people. You have to put yourself out there. Even if you don't know if it's going to pay off, build the connection, treat people right, because you never know when it's going to pay off, right? And I'm talking to this guy like, okay, obviously he's a NASCAR crew chief, knows his stuff, probably doesn't want to talk to me. But he started like, yeah, I think I've heard about you. Don't you race out like in Washington? And I was like, how the hell did you hear about me? And he was like, well, I run a late model shop up in Montana. Montana, what the, I didn't know racing existed in Montana, to be honest, at the time. But yeah, no, so he starts telling me that he runs these late models, and at the time I never even considered driving a late model. Like, it was always something I was fascinated by and thought like maybe I'd get there someday through the Baby Grand Racing, but just wasn't on the agenda yet. And he said, look, kid, if you're ever gonna move up or dream of doing this, you gotta move up quick. Like, you gotta get a late model, you gotta get going. He said, I know of a late model right now that's for sale. You go look at it, and if your folks decide to pull the trigger, I'll make you a promise. And I said, what's that? And he said, well, I've been needing help up in my shop. So you get this late model and bring it up to my shop. I'll show you how to work on it and set it up if you work for me. And so I think I just like walked into like the best door ever, right? So fast forward, we went and looked and bought this Roller 2017 left-hander, super late model chassis, and just got it from our local track, South Sound Speedway. It was previously Scott Graff's, for anyone out here. Stephen Blankenship worked on it. And yeah, so anyways, we get this car, and at the time, like, things moved so quick. I really didn't know what was happening, and really didn't know how over my head I was going into this until I got up to this guy's shop, and my parents drug it out there with me. I should say my grandpa and my dad went with me, and we road tripped this thing out there. And I literally just went up there, and they dropped me off with this guy that we had no clue, anything about him other than he worked on the 16 car and blah, blah, blah. And they just left me, obviously, like, we're going to have to see where this goes. So dropped me off with a car, and I think I stayed up there for like a week the first time, and flew out to our next race from there, I believe. And then went home from that. The next ARCA race, I mean. So yeah, that was how I met Travis and made the jump to late models, which happened so quickly. Like I said, there wasn't much details to really share in between. It was conversations that happened so quickly, and my parents kind of were so, at the time, thought they were so, I don't know the best word. They didn't have the knowledge to know what step we should take next. And so they were so sitting with such open ears to anyone they could really trust. And at the time, obviously it's like, okay, this guy knows what he's talking about, so let's go. And so Travis Sharp, kind of much like Sean Jones in the first episode, was one of those guys that really took me under his wing. And I learned a lot working with Travis. I mean, really just right out the get-go, I'll put that out there. Everything that I learned about late models pretty much to this point, and the foundation I have just in mechanics and whatever very light work of fabrication that I do, really came from him and working in his shop. But I didn't know at the time what it was going to lead to until we wrapped up that season and started talking. And the team that he had at the time was called Racing Dynamics, which they still run. I no longer work with at the time, or I should say at this time, with what we do now. But they still exist and they still run races, and Travis is doing his thing. But that's, we'll get there. So anyways, one thing led to the next. 2022 rolls around, and we're trying to figure out what we're going to do. So we have this late model, and that's our plan, to go late model racing. So right there, I'm going to stop on the late model stuff and back up before I have to go too far and then jump back where it really seems out of line. That's where the circle track stuff ended in 2021. In the beginning of 2021, part of the conversation where we mentioned I really, really wanted to see what, on the professional level, what it takes. We had that conversation earlier in this episode about how I wanted to see where what that looked like, and that's why I reached out to Bill. Well, same thing went for the driving aspect. We really put our minds together on like, hey, what do we need to do if we want to do this someday? What's the most important thing we do right now? And what we came up with, whether you think it's the right thing or not at the time, we decided I needed to put focus on getting comfortable on road courses. Now, when I was playing those video games and stuff growing up, everybody knew me as the kid that really loved the road courses. And I think that just grew from going to Sonoma my whole life, growing up there and watching races. But I loved running laps where I had been before. So I just happened to turn a lot of laps on the simulator on road courses. Okay, so keep that in mind. And my parents and I, we really wanted to figure out a way to do this. And I'm skipping over my words. I didn't really look into options. You don't even think about it when you don't know, right? You don't even know what's accessible out there. But my dad happened to find the Pro Drive Racing School, which is a Spec Racer Ford-based program. Spec Racer Fords are a spec racing car that is built by Ford Enterprises and monitored through the SCCA. And I'll speak on it the best I can. I don't race them full-time. I've never owned one, so, take this with a grain of salt. But Spec Racer Fords are a spec racing series in the SCCA that races worldwide, to my knowledge, at least countrywide. And they are a four-wheeled, full, somewhat bodied. They do have fenders, but open top spec racing series with a 160 horse roughly motor, 5-speed transmission. They've gone to a sequential now, which is super fun now that I've tried it. But at the time, they had an H pattern in the school. So they're on their third gen of them. The Gen 2 is what I took the school in originally, which had the H pattern with just the digital dash. Or I mean, not the digital dash. Sorry. The current Gen 3s have digital dashes. The Gen 2 just had the analog gauges. And anyways, my dad surprised me. And for my birthday, I got a 2-day racing school, which was, probably the best thing I could have done at the time. And for anyone in this area, I highly recommend their school. That's where I now work and instruct. We'll get there. Anyways, so I go to this school. It was March 6th, 2021. I remember it very vividly. And the only reason I remember all these dates is looking back at footage and stuff. I've just kind of got it burned into my brain, to be honest. But also the fact that these were one of the last times my grandma ever saw me on track. So it was really important to me. So I went to this school, and 2-day school. And the first day, again, all on my YouTube channel, I swear, I'm not lying to you, it was pouring rain. And we went out there, and so let me paint a picture for you. We get in this car, open top, first time I'm ever in this thing, and you're down in this hole where you got stuff all around you, right? And I'm trying to show this the best I can on the video. So if you can't see the video, I'll try to describe it with my words. This first time really having to do this with podcasts. But you're down in this hole. You got stuff on both sides of your head, so you can't really look left or right. But you got a pretty good field of view just in front of you. And they roll me out first car with like 8 cars behind me as other students. I'm out there doing my thing. Like, man, I must really suck because I'm not catching anyone. Like, thinking to myself, I thought I would have saw a car by now. I know there's some inexperienced people here. Like, I thought I'd be better than this. And I'm out there just, elbow to elbow, throwing this thing sideways through the rain. Turns out I was so focused on what was going on in front of me that I missed every black flag that was thrown at me from the corner stations. And in the school, this black flags mean, black flag all, everyone comes in. That's pretty standard for SCCA as well. And I missed every flag for like 3 laps, I think. Those are long laps. And I see them and I'm like, oh no. I'm thinking like, I'm in trouble. And I come in and I pull into the pits. And Todd Harris, who's come to be one of my good friends, was there at the time, and he was the head instructor. I go, Eric, and he goes, you're the one that's nicknamed Bubba, right? I'm like, yeah. And he's like, all right, listen here, Bubba. He's like, you racing, like, or in stock cars, I mean? And I was like, yeah. And he's like, that's why we're going to call you Bubba, because it's a fitting name. He said, I'm going to be honest, you missed every black flag out there, but that was some of the most entertaining driving I've ever watched. Like, watching somebody hang onto a car like that. And I had no clue it was something that was like, out of the ordinary. I had no clue what a rain line was. I'm just sliding across the rubber and hanging onto this thing and hooking up right before the track ends. It was just a mess, but, didn't crash it. So take that for what you will. And yeah, so they were like, yeah, we need to put rain tires on these things. So that's why we're trying to pull you in, kid. I'm like, okay, got it. I'll pay more attention to the flags, and they let it go. So, we finished the school, went pretty well, kind of went as I expected. Once it dried up, we were faster than most, but I say that so hesitantly because most of the people that go to the school do not have racing experience. So you have a leg up if you're showing up with any kind of knowledge in a car, right? And so I didn't think anything of it. And my dad shows up at the end of the day to watch me. And Todd pulls me and my dad to the side. And he's like, hey, can I talk to you guys real quick? Sure. So we pulled over and, what's up, And Todd's like, hey, are you free like in May sometime? When, like first week of May. And we're like, yeah, what's going on? And he's like, well, you did pretty good in our school. We'd like you to come out and drive the team car. And I didn't know what he was talking about at the point, but at the time. But I guess the Pro Drive Racing, come to learn, they have multiple cars that they run with their family, the Harris family, that they field in the SCCA races, along with a group called Flat Out Racing that fields almost 15 cars every race at Portland. That is a full arrive and drive program, and you can look them up, rent cars from them, whatever you want. They're great people. I would 110% recommend working with any of these people. But Flat Out Racing, it's a full arrive and drive service. They bring like 15 of these things in a massive hauler with everything you can ask for in that kind of service. And the Pro Drive cars are a few of those that show up. And so we're like, yeah, we'll come back out. Well, of course, And so we showed up on this test day, and they put me in, at the time, I had no clue again, but it was Calvin Harris's car. For anyone that's out here in the Northwest, Calvin is Todd's son and has had a lot of success in the SCCA ranks. So drove Calvin's car and just pushed it for everything I could and got down to like right into the high, like just below breaking the, just above breaking the 24s. I was like a 125 flat, I think you'll see in the video if you look on YouTube, which we kind of came up and we're like, what's the good times in these things? And they're like, H patterns, race time, low 25s, qualifying, mid to high 24s, and Sadev's, the sequential shifter, they picked up like half a second with those things. So the times got faster, but at the time, they were like, you're pretty quick. So, it was a big moment for me. And they right then and there asked me, they said, hey, curious, are you free like in June? And I said, man, you want me to come back? And they said, well, no, not to drive, but we need instructors. I said, instructors for what? They said, the school. We need more people to help kind of do the instruction stuff. And I was like, you do realize this is the first time I've ever been on a road course, right? And he's like, well, you look like you know what you're doing. I don't know how desperate Todd was at the time. And Todd, I love you, man. I mean, your guys' school is fantastic. I've had a wonderful time working with you guys, but I thought you guys were nuts for hiring me. I'm like, sure, I'll be there, and get paid. Why not? So I started working with these guys, and alongside that, in the baby grand stuff, I met a guy named Matt. He's from Australia, went back to Australia now, but I try to pronounce your name, Matt, but I'd butcher it. Dinskanowski? Something like that. Anyways, without butchering it anymore. Matt hooked me up with this guy because he heard that I wanted to do road racing. He said, hey, I got this guy that you might want to reach out to. So aside from the Bill thing and aside from the Pro Drive thing, I got this phone number, and he said, we raced this series called 24 Hours of Lemons. If you want to reach out to him, I'm sure he'll let you drive. And I'm like, sure, he'd let me drive? Like, what the hell? What are you talking about? But okay. So I gave him a call, and I was so nervous. And it's just funny to me looking back now, knowing these guys. But I was so nervous to give Chuck a call, and he's the sweetest man from Auburn, California. Oh, my goodness. Chuck, you are such a gentle soul. Anyways, he picks up. We have a great conversation, and he invites me down to test their Subaru WRX at the time. It was a wagon, O2 wagon, to come test it at Thunder Hill. And that was, one of my early experiences as well, getting on a road course. My dad went down there with me, and we met Chuck, and he's like, yeah, you're doing good. So we're going to have you come out to one of the races. And I would like to say it went that easy, but I think Doug, one of my teammates in that car, would kill me if I didn't back up and make a comment on this story. Because when we went down there for Thunder Hill, it was Chuck, my dad, myself, and I thought I was the only one driving. But then Doug, one of the teammates that drives with us, who is an instructor for Hooked on Driving, one of the programs that does track days, he races for the team as well, in Chuck's group that he's put together. And Doug was willing to give me in-car instruction that day. So we put him in, and I go out there, and I'm thinking like, okay, I got this. I knew what I was doing at Pro Drive, right? And I go out there, and he is screaming at me, like as soon as we hit the track, like, what the hell are you doing? Blah, blah, blah. And he's like, pull this thing in, pull this thing in. I'm like, what did I do wrong, man? We pull this thing in, and he's like, you realize you are not in the Daytona 500, right? I was like, what are you talking about? He's like, you are just pulling on this thing left and right and left and right. You're making me sick. You do that again, we're done. You're not going to listen to me, we're done. And I was like, whoa, sorry. And anyways, we go back out there. He's like, just smooth, be smooth. And by the end of the day, we had this thing cooking pretty good. But one of the funniest experiences for sure. And he talks about it all the time, because now that we've gone and raced these Lemons races with him, I've got it figured out now. And typically we're one of the fastest drivers and of the bunch. And Doug comes back and he's like, remember when you sucked and I taught you everything you know? Now you're out here beating me, blah, blah, blah. It was just funny. And we're all, super close in times. But still, it just, to get me to that point was a fun process, to say the absolute least. And so that was where we got our road course start. I think I've kind of covered everything, and I know this has been a little scatterbrain this episode, so I apologize for that. But I wanted to really cover in 2021 everything that happened. Again, that was the most monumental moment, or year, I should say, for our team, as so much developed from nothing. Just let me shuffle here. I'm kind of getting a leg falling asleep. Anyways, so yeah, we started looking towards 2022, which really surrounded this late model. And I went and spent in 2022, I think I stayed over 100. I think we did the math. There's like 110 days of the year working at Racing Dynamics, their shop up there in Marion, Montana. And I stayed most of those nights sleeping on a couch in their shop. I mean, really. And I just was there to learn everything I possibly could. Travis did a great job at teaching me, and I went and worked for drivers that he was already running with. And some of those drivers have become my greatest friends. One being Max Schroeder, who was racing for Travis a little bit at the time. And I had no clue who he was, and I've heard of these other drivers he was running with, but we went out and I started crewing for Max, and Max is just like the, it just instantly had that like big brother vibe. He's a little bit older than I am, in his upper 20s, I think, or mid 20s. Sorry, Max, you're not old. Anyways, and for anyone that's not from the Northwest, he raced in the super late models starting at South Sound. He raced everything from, I believe, quarter midgets to, I don't know if he did bandoleros, but I know he did super fours and then pro lates and then super late, and ran the Northwest Tour for a while. But he started racing for Travis, just looking for kind of an opportunity to go to that next level as well. And the Schroeder family, fantastic people. Again, I can't talk nice enough about these folks. Michael Ann, his mom, and Dale, his dad, they have always been so good to me. His girlfriend, Haley, all just incredible, sweet people. Anyone in the Northwest that's been around that group can stand by that. But yeah, we went and helped him out and a group of other people, and I just spent as much time working with Travis as I could, trying to learn what I could, and we scheduled some races, starting with my first race after spending, I think, 6 months building the car. I got it up there in October. My first race was in April. So, you do the math on about the amount of time we were up there, but fully went through the thing. We dropped the motor and transmission into it, squared the rear up. He taught me, just basics on front geometry. Again, you're telling this to somebody that has no clue what you're talking about, right? So there's only so much you can learn. But Travis did a great job kind of pacing me and just answered all my questions. Now, I'll say it now. Travis and I are two very different people. We just have two different ways of thinking, and we learned that quick. I mean, I remember times where he was just like, God dang it, kid. Sometimes you just got to shut up and just relax a little. And I'm like, no, you taught me this. It's got to be perfect. And, and it's just two people trying to figure out how to go fast, right? It was an interesting relationship. I learned a ton. And we scheduled, like I said, a handful of races through the course of 2022, trying to just learn as much as we can. And the late models, a lot of people are shocked to hear that to this day. I've only ran 7 late model races in my entire life. So 7 races in this late model, probably 20 max in the baby grand. And now we're sitting here racing full time in ARCA. So the jump to say it happened fast is an incredible understatement. And I understand to most people that's probably super unconventional. And to me, and honestly, when I say it out loud, I almost feel silly. But when you look at the results and the things we've exposed ourselves to, a lot of people start racing in one car at one track. And I think the thing that I was most lucky for was to race so many different cars on so many different tracks early on, racing with that Lemon Series and the Spec Racer Fords and all that. Chuck had his Subaru, and then he had everyone's favorite, the 67, or please be right, the 67 Avante, the Studebaker. That thing was a boat, but I loved racing it around Sonoma, and that was my first time ever on that track. We'll cover that story in a sec, but the places I got to drive with all these different people, I think that's what led to the opportunities and kind of being able to hold our own now. But I really try to push that perspective on people a little bit, because I think so many people see where we are, and without knowing us, respectfully and rightfully so, they believe that I'm so much more experienced than I am. And really, I'm just some kid that has taken every opportunity that somebody's handed him, as you would expect, and has lived my absolute dream for about 4 years now. And other than that, I quite frankly shouldn't be where I'm at, yet here we are. And that's just because of all the great people I've met along the way. And, we've held our own, which we'll get there. as far as talking about results. But in the late models, that was really an important year. And we spent all this time getting this car ready just to go to our first race. And unfortunately, had an incident, without going just into too much detail because it's not really necessary. We had a driver who just had a freak incident, kind of freaked out on the track and locked their brakes up coming out of turn 2 when everyone's full throttle wide open. And I'm in mid pack in this car, like 10th in the time in my my first ever late model race, and we're racing the Northwest Tour Pro Late Series. Started like 21st, got up to 10th at the time, and about 20 laps in, this person hit the brakes in front of me, and if you watch the video back, within 1.8 seconds of the time the driver touched the brakes, I was being shoved through their back bumper with like 4 cars behind me training, instantly. I mean, it happened so fast, there was no reacting. And it unfortunately just destroyed the front of the car. I thought it had to have clipped the car, and somehow it didn't. But to, somebody who doesn't know anything about cars, you get out and you just see this thing tore to all whatever you want to say. I mean, I'm like, it's done. My racing career's over. There goes my late model, and come to find out how fixable they really are. I shouldn't have even reacted the way I did. But honestly, looking back, I was pretty proud of the way I reacted because the situation really was a young driver who was trying to learn as much as she could on the track in the situation that she was in, and unfortunately just got kind of freaked out by what happened around her on the track, and she didn't know what else to do. And while slamming the brakes is never the right option on the track, unfortunately that was just what happened. And so we get out, I'm sitting there in the car, and the first thing I could do was just apologize to my parents. I mean, I'm just heartbroken. And, it was just, it was a moment where I sat in the car and I thought to myself, like, everyone that has helped me get to this point just lost everything in my mind. And I just felt so much guilt over something that I guess I couldn't control, right? But I just remember apologizing over the radio, telling my folks, like, I will fix this. I'm so sorry. I will find the money. I don't care what it takes. Sorry for the dogs in the background, but I was like, I don't care what it takes. I'll figure this out. Like, I'm so upset, but at the same time, I understood the situation. And I remember the, first time ever in a crash too, right? I'm sitting in the car. I didn't know really what to do. If I should get out, should I stay in the car? What is it on fire? I don't know. And a crew member pulls up, drops, I'm dropping the window net, and he goes, "You all right, kid?" And yeah, I'm all right. And he says, "Are you gonna get out?" And I said, "Well, how bad is it?" And he goes, "It's pretty bad, kid." And I'm like, "Oh, don't say that," And he's like, "Well, put your foot on the brake and we'll try to get you out of here." And I put my foot on the brake and goes to the floor. And all of a sudden, I guess he wasn't the one that said it was bad. He said, "It's not that bad, kid." I remember that. And I was like, okay, don't tell me too much. And all of a sudden I hear like a groan from the front of the car, and some guy's like, "Oh man, this thing's tore up." And his guy's like, I'm like, "Oh no." And he's like, "Oh, you had to say it, man. The kid's already upset enough." Anyways, I get out of the car and I'm just laughing with him. I mean, at that point, what do you do, right? And I'm helping him hook it up. And all the other drivers, I think they're just pissed all hell because they know what happened. And, I remember one kid behind me yelling and kicking his car, and I just didn't really know how to react. So I just kind of bit my tongue because I didn't know if it was my fault. I just helped him get the car off the track and went back. And once I saw the video and knew what happened, I just went up to the driver and we had a conversation, and she was trying to apologize. And I just told her, look, like, if you're trying to do this right, and you have this dream and a passion for it, do not let this discourage you. Think about the stories I've told you guys when I was in Baby Grands, right? I had no clue what I was doing out there. And unfortunately, she was just in a situation where she couldn't get out of the way. And I said, look, there's a lot of cars tore up, and I may not know much, but I said, we got to learn something from this, or else we just wasted a lot of money. And I told her, take this as a learning curve, about maybe being aware of the situations we're putting ourselves in. And maybe I was a little in over my head. And I told her that, being at that race for my first one. And maybe so was she, at the time, being a little younger than I was even. And I said, maybe we need to just focus on getting experience first and coming back and trying to prove ourselves second. And shook her hand, told her I'm glad she's all right. And we moved on. It was what it was, right? So rebuilt this thing and went out, and first race actually like that we ran, other than that 15 laps, that if you want to count that as my first race, being one of those 7, I guess it counts. But second race went out and finished third. Felt good about that. Got a podium at Mission Valley. And anyways, 5 of those 7 races were top 5s. 2 of them were mechanical DNFs. Yeah, it was a pretty good year. Not a lot of success, but also not a lot of big failures. It was just, I learned a lot being around the people that I was around. And I think that was super, super necessary for where I wanted to go. Oh man, a lot of dogs. Yeah, so 2022 really just came down to filling out the late model stuff. And we didn't really know where it was going to go from there. And honestly, I didn't expect it to go anywhere quick because of the results that we had, and I was still just spending a lot of time getting seat time. But we did spend a lot of time on the road courses, got to run a road course late model, finished podium in that, and just pretty much we created a pattern other than that first late model race. If you scratch that being only 10, 15 laps of racing, pretty much every series we debuted in, we podiumed. And it became this pattern that was great to see because it really boosted my confidence, which I think was something that I needed, especially after that crash. But yeah, it was just a year of development. And then on the ARCA side, I was still working with Bill McAnally. So working with their team, I was crewing for Cole Moore. They put me on that car full time. And again, just learned a ton working for those guys. And they put me, they let me have a few cool opportunities. One of them being working with Travis. He got a call from Bill, and in 2022 when we were doing that late model stuff, he was no longer the crew chief of the 16 car. Things just didn't pan out, and he wanted to go a different direction with the late models and focus on that. So that's where he ended up. And I was racing for him, but Bill called him and said, hey, we got somebody interested in renting one of our cars, come to be Daniel Dye. And he was just trying to get road course experience at Portland. So they said, hey, if you want to bring out a crew for this June race, you're going to have to assemble it with your guys, and we'll go out there and field this car, and you'll crew chief it. And so Travis checked with me and said, who do you think we can get? And sat down with him in his shop, and we put a list together of guys that could help us, and came up with this list that we game planned to go attack this race in Portland with. And honestly, it was a great time. We went out there with Daniel, and so they had Daniel reaching out to me. Okay, let me kind of go over this. So Daniel, I get his phone contact, and I'm thinking like, okay, this will be cool. Text a NASCAR driver. Well, he starts texting me, and he's like, yeah, they said that you're the road course guy, and I'm like, huh? And they're like, yeah, like you have driver's notes for me or something, like some video I could see. So I started sending him like video of me in Spec Ridge Fords. He's like, well, that doesn't really help. I'm like, well, I've been around there in a stock car. Like, I can tell you that much. Like, I'll give you my notes from that. And so we just started talking over the phone about notes, and we got to the track, and he chose me to be up in the spotters stand for practice. He wanted me to work with him, and shoot, we go out there. We had all the people we needed, all the help, and it starts pouring rain. This poor kid had never like really done a lot of road course racing, and it's pouring rain. And they sent him out there, and somehow, some way, we worked with him well enough. That thing ended up on the pole. And I was so shocked, honestly. Like, I thought there had to be a scoring issue. He had to go straight through a chicane somewhere, or like something. But everyone said it was legit, and he got the pole. And Daniel's come a long way. Obviously, he's now in the truck series and up full circle for Bill. But at the time, he was a GMS driver, GMS being one of the lead truck series teams. And so, yeah, it was a cool opportunity and worked for Cole's team the rest of the season. But at the end of 2022, and this was where everything really became this big pivotal moment of what are we going to do for next year in 2023. Travis got an opportunity with Daniel to go to crew chief his truck at GMS, and it really put us in the spot where we didn't know what was going to happen next, right? He had a group of guys that he was working with, one of them being this guy from Canada named Logan. And Logan Jewell, who was racing for him for a handful of years, he kept his cars at Travis's shop full time because he was so far north of the border. It's like 20 hours north of the border. There was no way he could ever transport a car down to go racing. So he kept all of his stuff there, and Travis maintained it. And when it came time to Travis accepting this role, there was no time or no space for us, honestly, to keep working with him. And so I told him, I said, I think you should go do this. And for me personally, I learned so much from him, but I told him I need to go out and do this on my own if I want to learn the way I think I need to, like we did with the Baby Grand. I said I need to go out and apply this stuff on my own and try it. So that's what we did. We separated, and Logan needed a place to go, given the situation. So he reached out, and we organized for him to come to our shop as well. And it was a connection that we kind of didn't know what we were getting into, but we really fell into this lucky position where we were working with fantastic people. Logan and his entire group has been, just overly generous and kind to us every time we've ever worked with them. And we just, the only reason I was willing to even go into this, right, and consider doing this was we were working with a guy that I met earlier that year, Chuck Jones. And Chuck has been, as of most recently, the biggest necessity, asset, helpful person that I could ask for in our current racing. And we met him because when we moved into our shop, his automotive shop was right next door. And he just happened to hear about us and needed a place to put his car. And we started working together. And we didn't really work much together until the end of that 2022 season where he came out to a couple late model races. And he said, kid, I can help you with this stuff, and I don't mind. Like, you don't got to pay me. We were so used to everyone wanting to be paid. He said, you don't got to pay me. You just help out, and you let me store my car at the shop anyways, so it's no big deal. And, bless his heart, Chuck is a fantastic person, always treated me so well. That's the only reason I was really willing to accept this from Logan going into that year with knowing like, okay, I don't really know what I'm doing, but I think I got a couple people here that do, and I think we're going to be okay. So just committed to it. And we said, let's just go learn. Let's go spend a year learning as much as we can. And that's what we plan on doing with my late model and Logan's until we went to the Portland race, the ARCA Portland race in September. And that was the moment where Bill kind of full circle come to find out what we were doing and my relationships working with Travis, and knew a bit about me. And he heard that I drove race cars through Travis and my dad and whatnot. And so my dad was down in the pits kind of looking at the cars as I was working on them, and Bill pulled him to the side and said, hey, what are your guys' plans for next year? And my dad laughed and said, the kid's racing a late model. And Bill said, well, what do you want to do someday? And from what my understanding is, my dad told him, Bill, we want to race for, like somebody like you one day, but, and he said, well, why don't you? And my dad just said, we can't afford that. There's just no way. But Bill was kind enough to pretty much say, put a number together and let me know what you can do. And we went back and, we pulled, my dang camera died again. Well, I'm jumping in, guys, because if you couldn't tell, the camera cut out, and for anyone that's not watching the video, unfortunately, it just doesn't make for a good quality video on the video side. So I had to end it there and went back and just looked at the footage and ended up seeing that we're right around an hour, which is what I'm going to try to keep these podcast episodes around. And I really do enjoy sitting down and explaining all this stuff to you guys. Obviously talking about this one being with the late models and how we met Travis and started working with Bill. It all happened so fast, as you can tell, and I'm grateful for it. It's unique for sure, and the stories are ones I'm going to carry with me forever. But I just thought I'd take the time to do this properly from what I could tell, and I really planned on doing it in 2 episodes, but it looks like it needs to be 3. So that's what we're going to do. I'll end this one here, and if anyone that wants to hear about from pretty much the start of our ARCA journey and how we ended up signing with Bill to the present day, that's going to be in our next episode that I'll sit down and try to put together here shortly. But I do hope you guys enjoy this. Thank you for watching all the way through, listening all the way through, however you do. Enjoy this podcast if you are listening to it. We just do appreciate you guys taking the time and hanging out with me because, like I said, just trying something new, right? So make sure if you want to see more of this, you hit the follow button, subscribe, however you can to follow us on the platform you're watching on, and hit the alert button if you want to see when these podcasts come out live. That way you can watch them and listen to them as quick as possible. But other than that, I just want to thank you guys for joining me in the driver's lounge. It's been fun trying to figure out how to do this, and I look forward to doing it more in the future. So, all right, I'm going to end it. Thanks. Till next time. Take it easy.